Is Tamar the one in the one in 2 Samuel 13? Is that the same Tamar who was from the line of Jesus? Two Tamars. One who was raped, that's in 2 Samuel 13, and the other Tamar in the line of Jesus. Do you guys understand the question? Okay, good. Let's put it this way. Here's the quick answer. The Tamar in 2 Samuel 13 is not the same Tamar that is listed in the genealogy of Jesus, but you're going to see there's a bit of a relation there. So let's do this. Let's open our Bibles and let's go to Genesis chapter 38, and let's take a look at Tamar, the one in the genealogy of Jesus. Okay? Genesis chapter 38, starting in verse 1. At that time, this was the time that after Joseph, one of the sons of Jacob, Joseph was sold into slavery by his wonderful brothers, right? Who would be the tribes of the tribes of Israel. We read at that time, after Joseph was sold into slavery, Judah, who was the fourth oldest son of the 12 sons, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and he made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth still to another son, the third one, and she named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Now, Judah got a wife for his firstborn son, after he got older, and her name was what? Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death. And thus Tamar now didn't have a husband. Then Judah said to the next son in line, Onan, sleep with your brother's wife, Tamar, and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother. Watch. That was called the Levirate vow. God had established that in the Old Testament, that if a woman's husband died and they hadn't had any children, then it was the obligation of the dead husband's brother or nearest relative to either marry her, and to have offspring for her so that the family line would carry on. So here Judah said to his next oldest son, hey, marry Tamar, fulfill your duty, have a child with her so that, the line could keep going. Verse 9, but Onan knew that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, Tamar, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. Now, let me just throw a side note here. Some people say that Onan was masturbating. And as a result, they say that, they make all kinds of theology about masturbation. This has nothing to do with masturbation, okay? The context is Onan, who was supposed to get Tamar pregnant to fulfill the Levirate vow, he would sleep with her, and right before his semen would enter her, he would remove himself, and that wouldn't happen. That's the point of all this, right? Why? Because Onan was a wicked son. All right? And what he did, verse 10, was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death also. So now we see Judah, he had 3 boys. 2 of his boys now were dead. And the oldest son's wife, Tamar, still didn't have any children. Well, look what happens, verse 11. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah, that's the third son, grows up. For he thought, he may too die, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live with her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. So do you get the point? Watch me. Judah was married. His wife died. He had 3 sons. 2 of his sons also died. the younger son, Shelah, was growing up. Judah had promised to Tamar, once the youngest boy gets old enough, he'll sleep with you, fulfill the Levirate vow, you'll have a child. So Tamar was waiting. But look what happens. After Judah's wife had died, when Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep. And his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law Judah is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes. She had been waiting for one of Judah's sons to fulfill what he was supposed to do. She had waited for the younger one. He obviously wasn't doing anything. Tamar heard that Judah showed up where she was staying. Look what happens. Verse 14, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she thought, though Shelah, that's the youngest son, had now what? Grown up. She had not been given to him as his wife. Do you see? He didn't fulfill his part. When Judah saw her, verse 15, when he saw Tamar, he thought she was a what? Prostitute. Why did he think she was a prostitute? Because she had dressed up as a prostitute. She had a plan. He thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his what? Daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me what? Sleep with you. Now watch me here. Judah. You guys heard of Judah? Do you guys understand? Jesus is the lion from the tribe of Judah. This is the Judah. Okay? This is the Judah, right? So you see what happens. Okay? His three boys don't fulfill their vow to his daughter-in-law, Tamar. She realizes the vow is not going to be fulfilled. She disguises herself as a prostitute. Judah, his wife is dead. He sees a prostitute. He says, hey, sleep with me. He doesn't realize it's Tamar. This is like a soap opera, isn't it? Come sleep with me now. And she said, well, what will you give me to sleep with you? I'll send you a young goat from my flock. Way to go, Judah. He was a big spender, huh? She said, well, will you also give me something as a pledge until you send it? She was setting him up. He said, what pledge should I give you? She said, your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand. It was a sign of authority. It was also a sign of who he was, right? Oh, she was setting him up, right? So he gave them to her, and he slept with her, and she became what? Pregnant. Uh-oh, Houston, we have a problem. Daughter-in-law getting pregnant by the father-in-law, right? After she left, she took off her veil. She went and then put back on her widow's clothes. Meanwhile, Judah, as he had promised to her earlier, sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back. You know, the staff and his cord and seal, to get it back from her. But the problem is, Judah's friend, he had the goat, but he couldn't find her now. Where was she at? He asked the men who lived there, where's the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enaim? There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here, they said. So he went back to Judah, right? Still has the goat probably. And he says, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep what she has, or we will become a what? Laughing stock. Do you see it? So Judah says, all right, can't find the prostitute. Let her keep my seal. Let her keep my staff, my cord, whatever. At least I have my goat back, right? No. Verse 24, about 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of what? Prostitution. And as a result, she is now what? Pregnant. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to what? Death. Esther, wouldn't you love to have a father-in-law like that, huh? As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Judah then recognized him, and he said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. And he did not sleep with her again. Why was she more righteous than Judah? God had promised back in Genesis 49 that the Messiah would come through the tribe of Judah. Tamar, many theologians believe, did what she had to do in order to keep that promise coming through the line. Judah should have been doing the job, but he didn't. And that's why we believe Judah responded, she is more righteous than me. Verse 27, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, this one came out first. But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out and she said, so this is how you've broken out. And as a result, he was named what? Perez. Very important name. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and his name was Zerah. Okay, so do you see who Tamar was? Okay? Now, let's put the story together even more. This sounds like a pretty messed up situation, doesn't it, right? Okay, let's go a little further. Go to Ruth right now. Ruth is right after Judges, okay? You have Joshua, then Judges, then Ruth, and then 1 Samuel. Go to Ruth. You guys all know the wonderful story of Ruth, right? Woman from Moab goes to Israel, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, meets a wonderful man by the name of Boaz, right? They end up getting married, and look what ends up happening. Chapter 4, verse 13. So Boaz, wonderful, handsome, godly man, took Ruth, and she became his what? Wife. When he had made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Very important. The woman said to Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. Boy, would he become famous. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Now watch. Naomi, the mother-in-law, took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son, even though it was Naomi's grandson. And they named the son what? Obed. Important name. Why? Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. Do you see? Through Boaz and Ruth, a son, Obed, and King David came through there. Why is that important? Now we're going to read the genealogy of David. This then is the family line of who? Perez. Who was Perez? All the way back, right? About 800 years earlier. Through that relationship of Judah and Tamar, they had a son by the name of Perez, one of the boys, right? Interesting. We read something here in Ruth. Somebody came through the line of Perez. David. This is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of who? Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of David. Do you see the genealogy line? Why is David such a big deal? Just go over to 2 Samuel chapter 7. This is so interesting. God made a promise, the Davidic covenant, to King David. In verse 16 of chapter 7, he said, David, it is through your house and your kingdom that's going to endure forever before me, God said. Your throne, David, is going to be established forever. How? The Messiah was going to come through King David's line. Do you see it? Watch, right? Judah, Tamar, right? Perez, go down the line. Obed, through Ruth and Boaz. Obed's the father of Jesse. Jesse's the father of David. David is given the promise by God that the Messiah would come through his house, his throne, and his kingdom will last forever. Do you see that? This gets even better. Go to chapter 11. You know, the great King David. We read this, I think it was this past weekend. King David, in the spring time, when kings were supposed to go off to war, you know, when it's nice weather, the horses could run, the chariots could go. King David was supposed to lead the army out to war. Instead, he sent his commander Joab with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. And we're told that David remained in Jerusalem. What happened when David remained in Jerusalem? Verse 2, one evening David got up from his bed, walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, her name is what? Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her, even though Uriah, her husband, was out the war fighting where David should have been. David committed adultery. We're told she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanliness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David. I am what? Pregnant. Wait a second. Do you see how messed up this line is? Judah, Tamar, okay. Coming down, you got a Moabite, he's Ruth. Okay, Moabites were pagans, cursed by God. David comes through all this. David's given the promise of the Messiah. David commits adultery and then tries to cover it up by murdering Bathsheba's husband. Go to chapter 13. David had some children. One of the children he had was with Bathsheba, right? Solomon. But he had other children from other wives. Watch how this all went down. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with, here's that other Tamar, who happened to be the beautiful sister of another one of David's sons, Absalom. So now you've got one of David's boys falling in love with his half-sister. They're all from David. Oh, this gets even better. Look at verse 2. Ammon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. So you know what he did? He pretended that he was so sick, he called Tamar in to help him. Come, my sister, help me. And she did. And look at verse 10. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food here into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand. And Tamar, unsuspecting sister, took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she took it to him to eat, he, what? Grabbed her and said, come to bed with me, my sister. No, my brother, she said to him, don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my what? Disgrace, if it was found out that she slept with her brother. And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king, our father David. He will not keep me from being married to you. Let's do this the right way. But Amnon refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than her, what did he do to her? He raped her. And then what happened after he raped her? Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, get up and get out of here. And eventually she was sent off in disgrace, and her brother Absalom found out about it, and eventually he ends up killing Amnon. And there was all kinds of craziness in the house of David. Do you see the two Tamars? They are actually related, aren't they? Go to Matthew chapter 1. starting in verse 1. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of who? Perez. He actually was, well, I guess he was his father, right? Yes. Okay. He was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was what? Tamar, who dressed up as a what? Prostitute. Good one. Okay. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Amminadab. Amminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Solomon. Solomon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Oh, by the way, a Canaanite prostitute. Boaz was the father of Obed. Remember we read that? Whose mother was Ruth, a woman from Moab. Curse line. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David, who, by the way, David was also the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. Do you see these women? And oh, by the way, go to verse 17. Thus there were 14 generations in all, from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. Do you see it? Look at the women in this line. Tamar, dressed up as a prostitute. Rahab, Canaanite prostitute, right? Ruth, Moabites. Bathsheba committed adultery with David. And yet the Messiah came through that line from the tribe of Judah. What's the moral of the story? Yeah, God can work through any dysfunction. God's plans cannot be changed, even though we humans try to do everything we can in our sin nature to change it, huh? Is that amazing or what? So I guess I can say to you this. If you're dealing with family issues, maybe family dysfunction, family problems, if there's anybody who can relate, it's Jesus Christ. He gets it. He understands it. He understands the shame, the stigma, and all the stuff that's attached. And yet, look how God turned bad for good and for his glory. The Messiah came through that line. And as Christians, we are recipients of that grace through that very line. Amen? Okay.